And we want to welcome to the podcast Megan Zwisohn.
You got it right. Perfect.
I've had to practice. I mean, her name starts with a Z, and so, but it's Zwisohn. And so what we're going to do now, I want to call her Megan Z since she's on Bob Z UnKUT. I now dub you Megan Z.
We're family.
We're family now. It's all good. It's all good. All right. So Megan is a candidate for City of Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney position.
Yes, sir.
She's going to tell us all about her experience in the Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney's office, as well as her 24 years experience as a prosecutor. So before we do that, I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And how do you view your candidacy for the Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney's office? Okay, right now, and I mean like right now, in today's climate of the criminal justice system, right now in today's climate of the criminal justice system, it appears to be only two types of participants in the criminal justice system. It's only two. You got your heroes and you got your villains. Notwithstanding the victims, but just participants. You got your heroes and you got your villains in the criminal justice system. So what do you think about that characterization?
I hate that characterization. I know where it comes from, but in my life and in my career, you can't break anybody down into a simple label. And that's a lot of where we have broken down our communication. So, I even say about defendants all the time, and especially the attorneys I train, a lot of the people come before us are not bad people. They may have done something bad, and you have to change how you think. Very few of the defendants that I have prosecuted have I looked at and said, that's a bad person. And I'll tell you, those tend to be some of my pedophiles, right? My child molesters. Oftentimes, people are, victims of circumstance, or they've made some bad decisions, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be held accountable to the highest extent if it's something like murder or rape. But it doesn't mean they're not human. And when we look at anybody as a hero and villain, we automatically label them and lose an objective way of looking, whether that's law enforcement or someone who is accused. Right? Because the way you look at law enforcement, you can label villain or hero. Same with the accused. And the moment we do that, we forget that what we're supposed to be doing is looking at everything objectively and everyone under their particular circumstance.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, it's how I've tried to always do my job. And,
I know, but I'm just saying, growing up in my neighborhood, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, when we saw the police, we ran. Whether we did something wrong or not. Automatic. And I'm not anti-police.
No, and I wouldn't try to argue that wasn't what was happening. I just think we need to be aware of that and talk to each other. So, for instance, having this conversation, that is one of the positives that I think we've had, you use the term in these times. One of the positives is people are willing to have those conversations now.
I don't know. I think some criminals are villains, and I think some police are villains, and I think some police are heroes, and some people that are regular. We can just agree to disagree. Let's move to the next question. But no, it's just I guess we should say they earned that bump like a mug. Some people earn that bump. So I got to give it to them. I'm not going to be out here and say, well, and it's going to lead up to our next question. But if you stand in your knee on somebody's neck, you a villain.
Yes.
You're a villain.
And I agree 100% with that.
Right.
If you're going to talk about individual people, I can see
am.
those labels. I'm sort of talking about in general, if
No.
we just decide one group or another group.
No, I said two type of participants. You got your villains and your heroes. I mean, and I mean, I know it's deeper than that. That's just a generalization, and I get where you're coming from. I'm not trying to beat you over your head with that. But anyway, but I did notice that your candidacy was, as well as your career as a prosecutor, was based upon your desire to advocate for the victims, which is not, another part of what I didn't talk about, the victims. I talked about heroes and villains, but victims, and so we know that this is a lot more complicated, but what makes your approach to victimization any different than business as usual?
Because what I've heard, especially coming out of Norfolk, is the communication level with victims. And that's, my approach is very victim-centered in the sense of we might not always be able to go forward on the case, and they don't direct what we do, but they deserve a conversation. They deserve the respect to know what's happening in their case. And that's where I end up sometimes on my own cases being the victim advocate, because I believe our job is public service. And if our job is public service, then we have to be willing to spend time with victims of crime and sit down and talk to them, especially if we're not able to go forward on their cases.
Megan, I feel you. I agree with you. And your name precedes you. Your name precedes you, and that's one of the reasons I want to get you on the show. I know I have some of my friends that may have crossed your path, and And they would tell me about you, and I was like, nah, the prosecutor, dog.
Let's make clear that they would tell you positive things.
No, they were saying like the prosecutor looked out, and I was like, the prosecutor? So why you pay the lawyer? No, I was just kidding. But they said that the prosecutor, had their back. So I was like, wow. So, just wanted to kind of give you a little shout out there that your reputation as a fair person precedes you. So I mean, that's why I was really glad to have you on the show. I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about the national level. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill, House Bill 7120, it has passed the House, and we're trying to get Republicans on board in the Senate. This bill includes provisions that would ban no-knock warrants, which is what happened with Breonna Taylor, chokeholds of any kind, which we know happened with George Floyd and Eric Garner. But today, I think that one of the things, the major sticking point on that bill is qualified immunity for police officers. So please explain to our audience, because I mean, it's a lot of people hear that phrase all the time. What is qualified immunity? But please explain to how you feel about it and what it is.
So I will preface this with knowing that my opinion is probably not going to be the most popular in this. I completely agree with almost all of the reforms in that bill. And thankfully, Virginia has already taken the steps necessary for a lot of those reforms. So qualified immunity is the idea. It's a civil concept. It's not a criminal concept. So we can still go after officers who break the law. But qualified immunity is the idea that if an officer violates someone's rights, they can't be sued civilly by the nature of their job. Because by the nature of their job, we sort of recognize some decisions are going to be made that are wrong. Now, what I will tell you, and this is something I tell everybody, I will always answer questions, and I can't promise everyone's going to like my answers.
That's okay.
I don't favor getting rid of qualified immunity. And the reason why is especially the way it was drafted in Virginia. So it was passed in Colorado, right? You know that. The Colorado bill required the officer to at least knowingly violate someone's rights, and that's absolutely 100% wrong, right? And when that can be proved, there's a lot of courts that have said, yep, you lose your qualified immunity when you do something knowingly violating those rights. The way Virginia has it is, it can be done accidentally, it can be done good faith. And my concern is that some of the argument is similar to the argument for the death penalty. It's going to be a deterrent. Officers will act correctly. Well, we know with the death penalty, people did not think about that when they were committing a murder. So when you've got officers who are making split-second decisions, they're not thinking about, I may get sued for this. Unfortunately, ahead of time, they might. And Norfolk specifically, and this is why I have to have this belief for Norfolk, we're already 100 officers down. And they're not lawyers. I can't tell you how many times officers have come into my office and have done a search. And they've thought they did everything right. And they had that belief. And I've looked at them and say, nope, bad search. They're not attorneys. And that's where I think we need to structure, if we're going to do something like that, we need to structure it better.
Well, I guess on the other side of that coin, you could look at places, let's say, where they don't have let's say Illinois. Chicago paid out $500 million with a B. $500 million towards lawsuits that went back and the taxpayers had to pay. And I'm not saying like the police officers they would have sued had that money either, but the city itself ended up paying for if they can't sue the police officers, then they just sue the police department, and that happened. So
and in some respects, that's the correct way because the police department is who has to be held responsible for getting bad officers off the streets and for how they train them.
So you don't think that that's a deterrent for, I don't know what's going to be a deterrent because right after the George Floyd verdict, the rest of the week, somebody got killed every day the rest of the week.
And I wish I had an answer.
I didn't.
I do. I understand everybody's arguments and I wish I had an answer. The other things that you mentioned, I am 100% in favor for. I've been in favor for long before this became a discussion. It's just that particular issue is where I differ on some things.
Right. And so like when you said the officers thought they did a good search, and I was reading somewhere that the firearms training for recruits is like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Then they give you a gun and go out and say, go and hit the community. We've trained you for 2 weeks. Right. And so I've long been an advocate to say, and people don't say, well, the training is wrong. And then I had conversations with not this chief of police, but the prior chief of police and this current sheriff. Say, hey, if you want to, one thing you're not getting. You're saying we can't get. They told me we couldn't get African American candidates because they had records. They couldn't get a large pool of African American. But what I told them, I said, hey, you got ODU, Hampton, Norfolk State, Virginia Wesleyan, Christopher Newport, Elizabeth City, and each semester they graduate a plethora of African-American young men and women with criminal justice degrees. So,
I was one of them
right.
from ODU.
Okay.
I know.
Behold. Don't play with me. But no, but the whole thing is like, if you want to, that's one job that you think of. Look at the teachers. They have to go through 4 years, get certified. You don't even have to have a college degree to be a policeman. And so when you say, I didn't know the search was bad, yeah, because you ain't go to school to learn the Constitution, to learn, you have Fourth Amendment rights. So how do you, it's from recruiting to training. So all of these things play a part in it.
Absolutely. There's nothing you said that I disagree with. Unfortunately, as the Commonwealth's attorney, I'll speak out about it, but I don't. I wish I did. I don't control the police department or advise them. That would be the city attorney about trainings and liability.
True. But y'all like cousins. No, it's
we work together, but we're not,
Oh, man, I'm on a roll.
It's okay.
So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Not knowing what our elected officials stand for. I've been an advocate for this, right? Because I know people that have been elected since I've, been around, like the town crier, You know, Paul, if the British are coming, you know, I've been trying to sound it long. And so, like, we knew Obama was for healthcare. We knew Obamacare. You know, we knew that every just about every politician, even Trump, built a wall. I mean, every politician generally has a pet, you know, thing, you know, we know them by. But I think for our local and some of our state representatives, you know, if I was going to run, they would say, well, he's about education and, you know what I'm saying, and different things that they would know that I would be passionate about. But what would citizens know you for?
So what I would hope they would know me for is that I am a true public servant. And what that means is I represent everybody in the city, not just one side, not just one ideal. And when you're a public servant, it's not about the title, it's about showing up every day for the people. So beyond, you know, along with that, it's about kids for me. I have spent years working with programs specifically to keep kids away from court. If we can keep kids out of the system, that's so much of the problems wiped out right there. You know, we know that just starts so many different things on paths that just don't end up in a correct way. So, you know, those are the two things. I truly believe I came into this job as a public servant, not as a prosecutor. You know, that's my job, but that's not how I viewed it.
Right.
And I just think that we need to do everything we can for kids.
Okay. I mean, so what would be your so it'd be that she's a servant. She's a servant.
Yes.
This woman has a servant heart. Okay, because you know I worked for a while with Second Chances, and I was the employment specialist, and my job was to go and get people who were just coming out of prison. It was like I had to find them employment, and like that was my job. And I was like, okay, so you know I'm gonna get this blood from this stone just in a moment, you know, but I agree with you with the service. I felt like that I needed to serve. You know, I had a servant's heart, and it's like, well, you know, please give my clients a job. You know, give them a chance. You know, that's what it's all about. So,
and I think if you start with a servant heart, you're willing to listen to people too. You don't go in thinking, I know all about everything. It's, if I'm going to be of service to you, I need to hear what it is you need first.
Right.
You know, and I think that's, if anything, even in my career, those who I've mentored, anything, that's what I want to be most thought of as.
Very good, very good. Now, this next question is kind of a question, and it blew me away because I thought I was dreaming when I heard it on about probably like 2 weeks ago. They said that during the coronavirus pandemic, at the height of the pandemic last year, the state's attorney for Maryland, for Baltimore, but her name is Marilyn Mosby. And you know, a lot of people, we heard of her from the Freddie Gray incident, when Freddie Gray, she was one of the people who were in the system that was advocating to charge the police. But she announced, now this blew me away, Marilyn Mosby, the state's attorney for Baltimore, announced in the city would no longer prosecute drug possession, prostitution, trespassing, and other minor charges to keep people out of jail and to limit the spread of the violence. I mean, of the virus, excuse me. Violent crime went down 20%. So she then said Baltimore is going to continue to decline prosecution of, all drug possession, prostitution, minor trafficking, misdemeanor case. So, you know, it's some cases to be made for that. I don't know if you want to just open the gates.
Well, first thing I'll say, so my husband's getting his doctorate. He just became a doctoral candidate in mental health counseling. And what he would say to me is, correlation doesn't mean causation.
Right.
You know, and I think we always have to look at things outside of the vacuum. What is truly, you know, keeping people from committing crime, or is it that people are not getting arrested? Because I don't think officers should waste their resources if they know a case is not going to go forward.
Right.
So we have to look at all of that. But there are going to be some crimes that we decide maybe as a community we don't want to, you know, put the full press of the law behind.
Right.
The problem we have, and one of the things that you and I can do a whole nother podcast about, is so many things we wouldn't have to bring into the criminal justice system if we had services for
Right.
people. So, I was always an advocate for getting rid of charging prostitutes. Right there, to me, as a person who works with sexual assault and children, that to me was victimizing more.
Trafficking.
But that's the problem, is there's no resources for people who are being human trafficked
Right.
unless they get picked up on prostitution sometimes. So it's if we want to stop criminalizing things, we have to be able to create places and resources that people feel safe to do outside of the system.
So is that along the lines of defunding the police, or
If you're referring to defunding the police
not as a statement, because everybody knows
right,
that
they
that's
use the wrong
ridiculous.
terms.
I mean,
If they had used
it's crazy, but
reprioritizing,
because that's what they're saying. They say,
That's what it really-
Well, if you have an organization, a nonprofit, or something that knows certain communities of women, or getting trafficked and stuff like that, or have resources, then maybe you may not want to send a whole police cruiser to take away when somebody's getting robbed and beaten or stabbed or whatever, and use for different situations.
Yep.
Because the police can't be mental health workers. They can't
Exactly.
and they're asked to do that a lot of times. They're asked to do all these things that they have, if they don't even know a search warrant is, daggone well they don't know.
don't use those words against me.
You said, you opened that line of questioning.
I did, didn't I? But no, that's exactly it. Reprioritizing budgets, that's got to be top of the list when we're looking at these things. And for all the good officers that I've worked with in my career, none of them want to victimize the victim. If they could just focus on what we grew up as thinking police work was, which was, those who are getting hurt, we want to stop that, versus hurting those who are getting hurt more.
Right. Well, moving to my next question or situation, and it's almost like, let's talk Lieutenant William Kelly, Norfolk police officer, fired for helping fundraise for Kyle Rittenhouse, who was the kid who opened fire in Wisconsin to kill protesters, shot protesters. And so when we see that he was fired for participating in a fundraiser and using city email to do it, allegedly, all we say is, told you.
No, you're right. And that's why the city made the decision they made. It doesn't, I refuse, and I've told my ODU students and my law students this for years. I tend not to comment on cases that aren't mine because I've seen how the media can portray them. So I don't know, the real details of Kyle Rittenhouse, but I know what he has come to represent.
Right.
Right? And so the problem with what Lieutenant Kelly did, and I was surprised because I had cases with Lieutenant Kelly. So the problem with what he did is exactly why the city had to make the decision they did. He made a comment trying to represent all law enforcement. And we already have those trust issues for exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Right? For exactly what you said. And that does not.
And after this
Help
podcast,
anybody.
if I get pulled over, I'm gonna roll to the nearest gas station or well-lit area. No, but I know it's funny, but no, I mean I get what you're saying. Is that even everyone is saying the same thing. They're saying when after the gentleman got shot the day after the verdict, we were saying it's gonna happen again. Lo and behold, Elizabeth City. I mean, and that's all we always say. Well, it's gonna happen again. I mean, everything has a breaking point. I thought they thought George Floyd was a breaking point. But and I think just to get your comment on this, Trevor Noah said it's the system. It's not that our bad apples. It's that the tree is rotten. Yeah, the tree is rotten.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
I think the best we can do at this stage is really dig our feet in and our heels in on holding everybody accountable and just continue to do it. we are a nation of extremes, and we expect one thing to fix everything, and that's never going to happen. And we think one incident represents every incident, and that's not the case. We need to dig our heels in and say, I am holding you accountable. And hopefully, over time, that will become the norm, as opposed to inaccountability or non-accountability. I'm tired, not holding someone accountable.
Unaccountable? No,
I know.
you got me confused. So, no, really, but okay, speaking of accountability, the police, I mean, in the oceanfront, they had a night of madness, I guess, a month ago, and involved the shooting of Donovan Lynch. He was shot and killed by the police, and they still haven't released his name, But they released Donovan Lynch's name the next day as if he was, one of the people who were, creating the problems. Here's my issue with that. Perhaps you can help me with it. Maybe.
Yeah,
But,
I don't know.
No, I'm kind of over the top, but I mean, I'm tired. I'm a black man in America. I'm tired of this. I have.
And the only
trauma.
reason why I said maybe is I wish I had the answers for everything.
I have trauma, and so everybody knows his name. Everybody knows his name. It's allegedly Officer Simmons. Everybody knows his name, and everybody knows that he knew him. He went to Salem High School with him. Everybody knows this, and I talked to the people in the mainstream media. I talked to Channel 10, Channel 3. I talked to the lady who wrote the story for Virginia Pilot, and I'm like, why won't you release his name? They're like, well, we haven't got an affirmative confirmation from the police department. Where are the investigative reporters? And the point is that it's just no transparency. So why are you like saying, okay, you gotta trust, we need you to trust. We need you to trust, but
I don't think that's the right answer anymore. I agree with you. I don't think that's enough anymore, and I think people deserve more. Now, I am not going to totally make a comment on Virginia Beach. That's not my purview.
No.
But if that was something that happened here, I can tell you the chief and I would be having discussions about transparency. And again, the chief would have to also follow what the city attorney did. All I could do is offer an opinion.
okay.
The city attorney, just like in Virginia Beach, is probably the one advising law enforcement as to when to release. And if their investigation isn't complete, that's probably what the advice is. I'm not there, and I'm very always clear about that. But I think you're right. That's the problem I have with a lot of these questions is all I can do is say, yeah, I wish I had a way to turn it around. All I can do is be me at this, each time I get a chance to make a decision.
Okay. Well, it takes me to our last question. If you are elected to the office of the Commonwealth's attorney, you say if you had a magic wand, on day one, what is the first thing you would do policy-wise, day one, and then after your first 100 days in office, what would you do?
And that's very timely because the pilot had an article today that sort of had our first three things, and it was hard to limit to three because there's so many things.
I beat him to it.
So you just, talking about transparency. It's going to take a while because of budget and technology, but the first thing I want to get started is what's called a data dashboard, so that the Commonwealth's attorney has a place where any citizen can go online and see the demographics of who's a victim, who's being prosecuted, what those crimes are for, where they're happening. So it's full transparency, and that's a way to keep us in check, and it's a way to keep, citizens informed as to what's happening, and also talk about information on that as to what other programs, what are things we're trying to do, like a constant information. The other things I want to do is start what's called trying to think of the right term that I used in the paper, because I had a couple different things I wanted to call it, and I settled on Justice and Professionalism Committee. We need to start teaching the young attorneys earlier about things, and we need to have regular discussions in the office about racial, social biases, all the things that people think they know about but don't because they're not talking about it.
Right.
The other things I want to do is really do an audit of victim witness and find out what services are we providing to victims and how we can improve those.
Well, that's great. Well, we have been speaking with Megan Zwisohn. I
love it.
Have to do it. I asked her earlier. I said, well, "Could you send me that phonetically?" And she sent it to me. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to talk about your website, or give yourself a plug, or let us know a little bit. You're running for and when whatever you want to say.
Thank you. So my website is meganforcommonwealth.com. You can go on there and find out more about me. We don't have time. I'm the oldest of all the candidates, so it would take me a lot longer to give you my life background, and there's a lot on there. I tend to be an open book, and I tend to talk too much, so I'll make this quicker. I've been doing this 24 years. I came into this job for victims. It was because of an experience of my best friend in 10th grade. And ever since then, I thought, if I have a voice, I'm going to use it for those who have been victimized. But I also came into this for the exact reasons you've been asking me these questions today. My parents were social activists. The idea that I was going to be a prosecutor and I was going to work for the man just blew my dad, away. He still is proud, but so I didn't come into this job being idealistic about what the problems with the system are. And I still managed to be a successful prosecutor and be fair. And that's, I was thankful you brought up the fact that, you have friends that have talked about, I don't just look at a case,
Right.
the charges, and I don't just look at who the defendant is. I want to know all of the information. And that's who you will have as your prosecutor, someone who has that at the top and trains all their attorneys and holds them to that level of responsibility as well.
Well, thank you very much for coming out, Megan. We want to thank you guys for checking us out on UnKUT with Bob Z, Community Views. And until next time, have a great day.